All right, welcome everyone. What an exciting day. I'm so pleased that you're all here today to unveil the result of really hundreds of hours of collaboration with our friends at ZGF Architects, Hoffman Construction, to imagine, design, and as of last month, begin to construct the Phase 2 building of the Knight campus. And a special welcome today to Carl Schultz, our new university president, who doesn't start his job until I think July, but traveled in for this event and I think 19 other meetings he told me today. Carl, thank you so much for being here. We look forward to introducing you to all of our friends and partners at the reception later today. Also here today are members of the UO leadership, the Knight campus faculty and associate faculty from across the university, many donors and friends from Eugene and Springfield, as well as further afield who have traveled in, especially for today's event. The Knight campus reflects a true inflection point in the history of the University of Oregon. Some people probably thought it was a little bit crazy to start a new campus that was focused on translational science and entirely new educational and research programs that had never been seen before at the University of Oregon. But as if you've seen the quote from Phil Knight on the wall in this building says and reminds us, we're not really caring about other people thinking our ideas are crazy. We are moving ahead at warp speed, trying to create an incredibly transformative translational research and training program. That's a pretty audacious goal. We want to do it better and differently than anybody else, and not just catch up, but actually leap ahead. And to do that really is taking a massive team effort. And many of you in this room have contributed significantly to the Knight campus's progress and growth thus far. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and to assure you that people are noticing what we're doing around the nation and across the world, what's happening here in Eugene. This photo, of course, is of the first Knight campus building. That's shown at night, all lit up. This is one of my favorite photos of the first building. Also a favorite, I think, of Patrick Phillips, who is the faculty lead on the design of this first building. And now, thanks to the incredible generosity and trust of Phil and Penny Knight, we are embarking on Phase 2 of the Knight campus. And as you'll see in a few moments, it will both complement the elegance of and connect directly through a new bridge to this first building. But before I show you the second building, I'd like to give you just a glimpse of what we've been doing and what the impact has been enabled by the Knight's initial historic $500 million Phase 1 gift. Now, I could spend an hour or more talking about our entire strategic plan. I promise not to do that. They only gave me a little bit of time up here today, but I'm really going to focus on that first pillar up there, which is about the convergent science. So what is convergent science? It's an approach that recognizes that solving tough problems requires collaboration, and many times collaboration across different fields, bringing them together to solve tough problems and have transformative impact. It's really a simple concept, but it's relatively difficult to implement. The initial focus of the Knight campus is the convergence of biosciences and bioengineering to impact human health. But you can imagine we can take this playbook and apply it to many other grand challenge areas in society as we build out this entire campus. Now, one critical element of the Knight campus's rapid progress so far has been the creation of numerous mutually beneficial partnerships across the University of Oregon, regionally in the state, nationally, and even internationally. And I don't have time to talk about all of those partnerships today, but I think the beautiful bridge over Franklin Boulevard is both symbolic of all of those new connections, as well as a literal and very busy conduit between U of O's basic science departments and the Knight campus's translational science and engineering. Now, beautiful bridges and buildings with world-class facilities are clearly essential, but buildings don't do research, and they certainly don't train students. People do. As our friend Dave Petrone likes to say, it's really about the people. And since we opened this building in September 2020, so less than 3 years ago, the Knight campus has grown to roughly 300 faculty, staff, and students, bringing the Knight campus Building 1 to approximately 90% capacity. I am very, very proud of the team we've recruited at Knight campus, and it's that team as well as others in this room today that deserve the credit for the progress that you see. With the Knight campus, Knight's vote of confidence to embark on Phase 2 and build a new 185,000 square foot building, We can now envision creating a critical mass of scientists and innovators, research facilities, and educational spaces to achieve the Knight campus's ambitious goals. All right, I'd now like to show you a few examples of what can be achieved by bringing together the convergence of people, technology, and science from different areas. The first example is 3D printed orthopedic implants. Now, 3D printing was initially used, as many of you probably know, simply for creating design prototypes, but constant technological advancements have enabled it to now be used to make functional production parts for medical and many other applications. And several Knight campus faculty, like Professors Paul Dalton, Tim Gardner, and Gabriela Lindberg, are continuing to push the boundaries of 3D printing and even bioprinting with living cells. This is an example of collaborative work from my lab where we designed a novel 3D printed architecture that accelerates bone ingrowth into orthopedic implants. This involved combining expertise in imaging, biomechanics, material science, orthopedic surgery, and eventually artificial intelligence to develop and test this gyroid architecture you see on the left that provides an optimal combination of strength for load bearing in the body and a porous structure that bone loves to grow into. Now, after several years of research and several publications, we started a company called Restore 3D that now makes personalized 3D printed implants for patients. The PhD students that you see on the bottom here who originally worked on that project, Cambry Kelly and Andrew Miller, graduated with their degrees and are currently the Chief Technology Officer and the Chief Operating Officer of the company. That strategy of training PhD students to have business skills is something that we've embraced in the Knight campus by partnering with the Lundquist College of Business. In fact, all of our bioengineering PhD students take a required course on innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, in my view, 3D printing is the future of medical device manufacturing because you can cost effectively produce arbitrarily complex implants that perfectly match the patient's anatomy. And the design innovation time, which typically would take about 7 years historically, you can see was down to a matter of a few weeks from the design process through implantation. Restore 3D is a rapidly growing company. It's expected to have over $20 million in revenue this year. And importantly, the University of Oregon owns equity in this company, and that will someday return resources to help fund future startups at the University of Oregon. So let me show you how this works actually in a patient. Here's a clinical case of a man who was successfully treated for a large bone tumor, but unfortunately was left with a massive hole in his leg. And the way this works is the doctors have 2D CT images. The engineers at Restore 3D then take those images and segment them into the different bones, which are represented by the different colors. They reconstruct that into a three-dimensional image. And from that, you can see the massive hole in the bone that was left by the treated tumor. And then they develop a realignment and a reconstruction plan with the surgeon. From there, you can actually 3D print the devices that are actually used for putting in the implantation, and then the actual device is printed and implanted in the patient. And here you can see the radiograph of the patient with the implanted implant. And you can see him now walking around 6 months post-op, getting around quite well with a functioning leg and ankle and a dramatic improvement in his quality of life. Other Knight campus faculty are developing other different medical devices that are very innovative. Professor Felix Deku, for example, is using microfabrication in our clean room downstairs to create next-generation neural interfaces for treating patients with degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's disease. And Kiki Young has created a UO startup company called Pandaria Technologies with 2 of his postdoctoral fellows to commercialize implantable sensors to monitor and optimize the rehab of patients following procedures like ACL reconstruction. Guy, Salil, and Mike have received SBIR funding from the government, and they will submit to the FDA for their suture button product to be approved this year. Now, Building 2 of the Knight campus will include incubator space with wet labs, so startup companies like Pandaria Technologies will have a place to spin out to, and existing companies outside the university can lease space so that they can come in and be adjacent to the innovative research and trainees in the building. And I'm so pleased to share that joining us in this, the Pape family has named the Pape Family Innovation Center in both buildings 1 and 2. And Susie, I know you're here somewhere. Thank you so much. Your family has been such strong supporters of the university over the years, and I'm so grateful for your partnership and support in our innovation efforts and the impact it will have both on regional economic development as well as human health over the years. With these new facilities, the entrepreneurial talent we are recruiting, and now venture funding through the new Launch Oregon initiative, the University of Oregon is putting together all the necessary pieces for a thriving innovation ecosystem. Now, to give you a sense of some of the innovations coming down the pipeline that we hope will be commercialized someday, imagine if you could create treatments for cancer patients or those with osteoarthritis that don't require the use of metal or plastic implants, but instead regenerate the patient's own living tissues using degradable biomaterials and biological components. That is the goal of several faculty in the Knight campus, including Nick Willett, Gabriella Lindberg, and our new bioengineering department chair, Danielle Benoit, who are international leaders in the field of biomaterials and regenerative medicine. Here's a specific example where you can see the work of postdoctoral fellow Jenny Romanowitz, who's using our bioprinting robot on the third floor of this building to make organoids made out of living cells. These bone microdots, as we like to call them, can be used to test the effectiveness of new drugs or as an injectable therapy to regenerate large defects like the one the man had from his tumor. Another highly innovative member of our faculty is Professor Paul Dalton, who we recruited to join us from Germany. Paul is the inventor, the worldwide inventor, of a new 3D printing technology called melt electrowriting, or MEW. MEW produces fibers and 3D scaffolds at scales and speeds that have never been possible before, and it's already being used as a platform to build living human skin tissue for testing the safety of drugs and products, as well as to create corneal implants in collaboration with Professor Bala Ambadi here in the Knight campus. The possibilities for healthcare applications are limitless, and Paul has grand plans to scale this technology up and create a startup company. Now, building on this work and to make it more widely available, one of our big plans in Building 2 is a uniquely integrated biofabrication and bioanalysis core facility. And this will allow us to scale up our ability to make 3D tissues and analyze their molecular and cellular characteristics. This core will include the latest state-of-the-art equipment made possible with $10 million from the state of Oregon, and will of course be available to anybody at the University of Oregon, but also our colleagues at OSU and OHSU, as well as industry partners. These new capabilities will enhance our research efforts and ability to attract more amazingly talented students and faculty, creating that flywheel effect of momentum that's needed to accelerate our programs and impact. And the Knight campus is already creating opportunities to think bigger and partner with the best. The WUSI Human Performance Alliance is a $220 million global initiative to promote wellness and peak performance through scientific discovery and innovation. This alliance was funded for the next 10 years by Clara Wu and Joe Tsai, and is the first initiative that I'm aware of that has bridged athletics and academics at the University of Oregon in a significant way, with students, programming, and funding working across units to create knowledge that will have an impact beyond this university's walls. I'd like to highlight Professors Nick Willett and Mike Hahn, who helped lead me in this effort, and also recognize UO partners such as the Singers and Andersons and Bldgs, who are all here today, who have stepped up to ensure a legacy for the University of Oregon to be known forever as an international leader in this emerging field of human performance. And let me just give you one example of one of the projects being funded. We are collaborating with the Harvard Female Athlete Program to study the huge problem of female runners who develop bone stress injuries. You may not know, approximately 20% of running athletes are sidelined at some point by bone stress injuries, sometimes for months or even years. Understanding how to guide the athletes to know when to return safely to activity is therefore very important. Our Harvard colleagues had performed a study on 30 female runners with bone stress injuries, and interestingly, they showed, as you can see here, a very significant loss in bone density that bottomed out at 3 months, right when most doctors would be advising the athletes to start running again. Unfortunately, 10 of the 30 athletes they were studying re-injured themselves after returning to running, but they realized that the study didn't give them any indications as to how to predict which ones would re-injure and which would not. Because of the alliance that we're involved in, we learned that as part of the study, they collected blood samples at 5 points during the 1 year injury post-injury. And one of our areas of expertise here at the Knight campus is to use large-scale proteomic analysis and machine learning to try to predict the outcomes for patients after severe trauma. And so we offered to try that on these same patients. And you can see the results here. This is still a developing story, but Dr. Romanowitz's early analysis of 1,500 proteins indicates that the runners who refractured, highlighted in red, and the runners who healed without refracture, highlighted in green, can be readily distinguished from the protein signature in their blood. And in fact, over 90 proteins of the 1,500 that we studied were significantly different between the patient populations. These results suggest that it may be able to predict which runners are at the greatest risk of re-injury and recommend a more cautious timeline for return to activity. Building on this study, we're very excited that this fall we will be able to participate in a multi-site clinical trial where we will test a bone-stimulating drug that's normally used for osteoporosis to see whether it can help to prevent bone stress injuries in these running athletes. And finally, in terms of faculty all-stars, I would be remiss not to mention 3 of our assistant professors who have different but complementary expertise. Because their labs are located in the same open neighborhood in this building, which is a building design concept we copied in the second building, they and their students see each other every single day, and the proximity leads to synergistic collaborations. Together, they form our protein engineering and synthetic biology group that combines data science and scalable experimental methods to address big, audacious questions in science. So what if you could design a biomaterial and a protein to interact such that they deliver the therapeutic at exactly the right time and place to maximize the benefit of the therapeutic? Marian Hederaci is doing just that, using her functionalized biomaterials to help regenerate damaged tissues in the body. And what if you could scale up the production of genes to levels never achieved before to design new enzymes and therapeutic drugs more efficiently? That is the focus of Caleb Plush's lab, who's using his unique approach to create new biosensors and antibodies. And what if you could use sophisticated computational modeling, much smarter than ChatGPT, to screen thousands of possible protein designs and pick the most promising ones and do that in a way that's much faster than you could ever do one at a time in the lab? That is the fascinating work of protein engineer Parisa Hosseinzadeh. Any one of these efforts alone could shape how we treat patients in the future, but taken together, these 3 represent an unrivaled triple threat to diseases like cancer or osteoporosis. And it's not just us who think they're awesome. They have collectively been awarded a total of nearly $8 million in funding, each receiving an NIH grant on their first submission of the last couple of years. To put that in perspective for you, it normally takes an average of 6 to 7 attempts for a typical junior faculty member to get their first grant. And the average age for someone to earn their first NIH grant is 42 years old. Building 2 will allow us to recruit at least 15 additional tenure-track faculty, and we can only hope they are as talented as these 3 young innovators. And of course, critical to translating discoveries into impact is to train the next generation of scientists, innovators, and founders. Building 2 will allow us to do more and better. As wonderful as Building 1 is, it was actually not designed for engineering. And so we are paying attention to that and customizing Building 2 for engineering students, which includes plenty of maker spaces for students to learn, prototype, and test their inventions. As you can see, in just a few short years, we've been able to not only launch new degree programs, but recruit significant scientific talent for the university degrees at the Knight campus. Imagine a future where our second building opens, being able to scale up everything that we're doing, including training students to enter the workforce and contribute to innovations that we can't even imagine today. Now, before we unveil the design of Knight Campus Building 2, let me just take a moment to celebrate those who have been with us as donors, partners, and champions along the way, including those who are in bold here who are with us today. In addition to the incredible generosity of Phil and Penny, we have raised over $75 million in other gifts. Thank you to the many of you in the room today, as well as those who could not join us, who have been partners in advancing our research programs, training students, launching companies, and importantly, building a breathtaking second building to do everything I described today bigger and better. Now, I mentioned the building's gonna be beautiful, and we certainly are in a beautiful one today, but I know you all came to see what the new design looks like. So without further ado, I present to you an initial peek of what the Knight campus's second building and its connecting bridge will look like at night as viewed from the first building across the mill race. It's hard to believe that's not a photograph, isn't it? All right, and now it's my pleasure to invite Braulio Baptista up to take over. He's our lead architect and a partner at ZGF, and he's going to take us through the design in more detail and literally fly us through the new building.
Thank you. I want to start on a personal note. It's incredibly humbling and immensely gratifying to think that a building that I helped design would house such incredible and impactful work. I want to start by thanking you, Bob, thanking the Knight campus, the University of Oregon, everyone that's been involved. I stand here representing a really large team, and everyone deserves credit for the work that you're going to see today. I think together we've created a place of beauty, a place that will inspire and uplift those that will carry out their work here, their guests, their visitors, and also the Knight campus community and the University of Oregon community as well. Most of all, this is a place that's designed around this mission of scientific impact, accelerated scientific impact through research. And so you'll see later how that reflects in the layout of the building. And it continues upon the themes that are already set up by the Phase 1 building of a campus that is a catalyst for research, a catalyst for innovation, that the architecture reflects an ethos of looking forward, reflects an ethos of innovation. So. And I can advance my own slide. Phase 2 will also put the campus into Knight campus. The two buildings will complement each other to frame and give shape to the open space, creating spaces for hangout, imparting this with a collegiate identity, and giving users of the buildings, as well as visitors or those even passing by, a sense of belonging and a sense of place. This is an aerial simulation with the Phase 1 building here in the foreground, the Phase 2 building, and you can see the Willamette River beyond. The elegant form of the Phase 2 building borrows from the lines of the Phase 1 building. It will actually be really visible from Franklin, right at the 100% corner, which is Franklin and Agate or Riverfront Parkway as it continues to the north here. So it heightens the presence of the Knight campus on Franklin, and it strengthens its role as a gateway to the north. And the first space that greets you is a cafe with an outside seating area, which signals also that the Knight campus is open to anyone that wants to come here. And also it'll shorten the psychological distances between the main campus and Autzen Stadium and the river. So imagine stopping by here and grabbing a coffee on a dreary day on the way to the football game. So it'll really help to extend the collegiate identity and the collegiate experience of the campus further towards the north. In that space, when you turn west, in the composition, the ensemble between the Phase 2 building and the Phase 1 building and the Mill Race Bridge, they help to draw yet another portal, which is to the open space and the core of the Knight campus, if you will. And you can see here the activity that could manifest right outside of the cafe. And so this gateway, double portal gateway, is celebrated not only with signature architecture, but also with a vibrant manifestation of campus life, which is really what it's all about, the people that make the work possible and the people that make our experiences here a meaningful experience. And this idea of activating the public realm, activating the campus space, continues on to the west side of the building, where a terrace space that's west-facing will get great solar exposure in the afternoon, when the sun opens up in the spring, looking out onto the green open space, and really providing greater opportunities for spilling outside and for really bringing vibrant life to this place that you see right outside the window here. So let's now build the blocks that make up the building, and you'll understand sort of the main organizing principles and how it's organized around being a catalyst for research. So this is our site. You see a Riverfront Parkway running on the upper right-hand corner, campus phase 1, Knight Campus building, and then Franklin Boulevard and the Mill Race. And so given the long dimensions of the site, the main partie, which is a fancy word for the main organization of the building, is really 2 bars. One bar has labs, and the labs are organized in neighborhoods that are intimately scaled but that are interconnected, which promotes greater elasticity and flexibility in the usage of that space. Directly across from that is a bar that laminates onto the lab bar, and it includes all the offices, interaction spaces, and social spaces. And that promotes the critical adjacencies between places where people are working, doing write-up, writing grants, et cetera, and their lab environment. The forms then inflect on the east side to break up the facade along Riverfront Parkway and establish an urban edge. And on the west side, it sort of V's in as a gesture of embrace towards the green open space. And the further gesture of embrace is to lift up the office form to create more porosity on the ground floor level and on the second level to allow for that connection to nature, which really makes the experience of the building and the campus interconnected and more meaningful. And then there are other articulations where key spaces like the seminar room, which is at the corner, and the computational suite begin to heighten the dialogue between building the inside space and the exterior space. And then that dialogue continues in the upper levels as a device to connect users of the building to nature and also bring daylight into the building to help humanize those spaces and make that experience inside the building more pleasant as well. So with a little bit more detail now, we're actually going to walk through some of the spaces on each floor of the building, So we have the same orientation with the phase 1 building here on the foreground on the lower right-hand corner, our 4-story building. We have 3 main entries into the building, one from the South Plaza, which called right there South Entry, a west entry that's off of the West Event Plaza, and then an east entry, which is off of Riverfront Parkway. So all those spaces enter converging into the space that we call the Forum, which is a big open lobby kind of space, and all of the uses on the ground floor revolve around that space. So we have the computational suite, where computational researchers, which are an integral part of the research, will have a beautiful suite looking out on the green spaces that you see outside. We have the Pape Innovation Wing, where still connected to the awareness of the building, but with a little bit of privacy, will be great spaces for those industry partners and those spin-off companies to be housed within the building. We have the Biocharacterization Lab, which was important to place right there in the middle of the forum space, so science on display helps to drive, for even a quick visitor, what goes on in this building and how incredible it all is. And then the cafe that I mentioned before, the bistro, and the seminar room, which is a room that will house functions like this one, but it's a little bit more flexible. It'll be flat floor, and you'll see a little bit of a visualization of it later. And then the forum, as I mentioned, brings it all together in this beautiful space with biophilic use of materials with lots of wood, connection to the west terrace. And the forum is really about community, about convergence, about science on display, and about convening as well. At the north end of the forum, you'll see the stair, the open stair that connects to all of the floors of the building. And the stair is a wood object that rises through the middle of the building as a metaphor for a tree, for nature, again, in these biophilic elements, helping to humanize the space. We like to design stairs that we call irresistible to get people to actually be more active and take the stairs up and down. And so I hope that this stair is irresistible to users of this building. And you'll see here that as you're coming down from the upper floors, not only the form reveals itself to you, but also the outside terrace. So the connection to the outside is palpable in this space. So moving on to the second floor, here's that central stair indicated in this blue zone here. And it was important for this building as another strategy for convergence to have one means of circulating up and down, one main open stair and elevator, which are right in the center. And the idea behind that is to promote more interface of people circulating up and down the building, and also meeting spaces revolve around that central core. So we're increasing the chances for intellectual collisions, which empower collaboration, and in turn, as Bob mentioned before, empower the research enterprise. And so the forum space is off of that as well. The forum is really a double height space. And off of that space are the teaching labs, which are important for the education component of the mission of the Knight campus. And then on the second floor, we have the first experimentalist research neighborhood, which involves wet lab space, which you see here in the orange tones, and the associated office and meeting spaces, which you see here in blue, in the light pink, and the fuchsia. And then we also have the first of a number of terraces that continue this theme of being able to step outside directly from your work areas as just a great amenity to have. And we know that since the pandemic, knock on wood, that we don't go through another one of those, but the ability to step outside and remove your mask, or even to just take a phone call, has become a much bigger deal. And so here's a visualization in black and white of the vantage points that you would have from that terrace, looking south towards the Phase 1 building, you can see there in the distance, and how the idea of these terraces really heighten the dialogue and the theater of activity that can occur in 3 dimensions. Now level 3 and then level 4 are laid out exactly the same. They house, for the full bar along the east, lab neighborhoods with a combination of support space and open labs, as well as the office spaces that are directly adjacent to it, promoting great adjacency as well as direct visual lines of sight between the office areas and the lab areas. And you can see that the pink spaces where you meet, they were organized on each floor to promote sharing of space, but also promote some individual usage of space as well. Again, building on the idea that sharing spaces actually promotes collaboration. And so these are the terraces. The balcony terraces at levels 3 and 4 on the south end of the lab bar will be just a great perch to be. They're a little bit more out of the way, a little bit more quiet, but they'll offer incredible views down Agate towards Hayward Field and the campus, and I think you'll be able to see the tower at Hayward Field from there. On a sunny day, you'll have some cover there. It'll be an awesome spot. The 2 main courtyard terraces that the office neighborhoods are shaped around are light-giving devices, as well as opportunities for those folks working there to step outside, breathe in some fresh air, and get direct views into this beautiful space, in the open space. So it'll have this sort of tree house-like quality with the elements of the facade continuing beyond. So the view that you have on the left here is inside one of those office areas, and as you step outside, that's the outdoor courtyard space that you have in 2 stories. And those stairs that connect the 2 actually promote, again, more connectivity between researchers that are on the 4th floor and also on the 3rd floor. And then a little bit on the facade, I was really inspired, the whole team was really inspired by some of the objects that Bob spoke about earlier. These beautiful scaffolds that are printed in titanium. Is that the material? And so in thinking about designing a high-performance facade, we're really inspired by the folds of those scaffolds and the spaces in between to develop a faceted system of fins that shade the facade, that also allow natural light in, but keep unwanted solar gain out. So it's really a high-performance facade that's optimized to maximize views and daylight, as I mentioned before, but keep the spaces inside from overheating. And the faceting that you see here actually harks back to some of the glass screens that you see in the Phase 1 building, which will allow the 2 buildings to have an aesthetic tie. They're not twins, but they're definitely part of a set. They're cousins, if you will. And so speaking of sustainability, we have our high performance facade. We're shooting for a LEED Gold certification. We have 40% energy savings based on a baseline building, which involves very efficient ventilation, efficient daylighting strategies, as well as efficient LED fixtures. Indoor air quality is really important, so the use of clean materials as well as improved ventilation for the indoor spaces, as well as reducing the heat island effect through landscaping and darker or lighter tones in both the roof as well as the paving on exterior grade. And then on water, we're using all adaptive or native plants to reduce irrigation. And then inside the building, we are using efficient fixtures, and we're also recycling some of the water from the deionization process. I think it's 45,000 gallons that will be used in the building for flushing fixtures. So we're gonna stop here and now take a little bit of a more dynamic tour through the spaces, and we need to switch to our animation. So here we are at the mill race, and we're approaching the south end of the lab bar with the cafe and the seating, greeting you with the activity that could help to foster. The bridge in the phase 1 building on the left helped to frame yet another portal into the green space in the heart of the night campus. And as you turn towards the main entry, you'll see that the activity of the cafe is very visible. Again, being able to see someone that you meant to talk to that day about something that you're working on. If they're in the cafe, you'll go and grab a coffee with them. As you enter the forum, you're greeted with the reception desk. The cafe is accessible to your right. And so the biocharacterization lab, which is very visible, you see that lab has views to the forum and borrowed views to the east, and you can continue to look back towards the back screens. And now we're entering the seminar room. We're back on the front, sorry for the confusion. Entering the seminar room, and as I mentioned, a space that's clad in wood. It's like a wood box that's about bringing nature inside the building. Now we're gonna do another approach, which is if you're coming from this building at level 2, entering along the bridge over the mill race. So we're back in the forum space now on the second floor, which looks down onto the floor below. So to the right are the teaching labs with the student maker space in view. So it's not only science on display, it's also making on display. And these areas that you see here will be areas where students waiting for lab teaching sessions or for a place in the maker space will be hanging out, adding life to the heart of the building, to the forum. And as we go around and look back south, you'll see back to the south entry that we had come in before in the reception desk. So this space is very connected vertically. And I wanna say, I think the aspect ratio of the screen is squeezing things a little bit. So everything looks a little bit taller to me. Now we're heading into the teaching wing, and so we have a teaching lab here. The hallway leads to additional teaching labs as well as meeting spaces for the students. And now we're back in the student maker space, and you can see the borrowed views that you get to the outside through the forum space from that student maker space. Now we're gonna enter the building from the east side along the Riverfront Parkway. Whether you just parked in the parking garage that's right over there, you'll see the entry into the building from the east happens at the natural break between the two volumes of the facade, so it's very clearly demarcated. And as you're entering the building here, you'll see that the west entry, which you'll get to go through later, is actually aligned, creating sort of a breezeway effect and allowing for a sense of connection to the open space and to the green to the west of the building as well. So this entry leads right to the forum if you keep going forward, but we're not gonna go there. We're gonna turn and check out one of the smaller labs in the innovation wing, in the PAPE innovation wing. So Those labs are individual labs along a hallway to allow for privacy for those companies, but they share break room and some conference rooms to allow for some collaboration amongst those folks as well. And here's one of those smaller labs looking towards the east. For the west terrace entry, I'm going to ask you to fly with me. And so here's the west facade of the building that we were able to see in diagram format a little bit before. We have the green open space to our left, and one of the south terrace courtyard on the right here, beyond the second floor terrace. And we're descending onto the at-grade event terrace. And you can see that for events like the one that we're having today, as well as day-to-day, this will be just a great spot to hang out. Imagine activity happening up above, looking down on the activity below. And this is what I meant about that theater of activity in 3 dimensions and how it helps to animate the campus, not only along the ground plane, but also along the vertical dimension as well. Entering through the west, you see the entry to the east right beyond that we just went through. And again, everything connects back to the forum as an orienting device and also reinforcing it as the core, the heart of the campus. So we're planning incredible graphics to help to add a sense of energy to the space and also to talk about the region. We have seating areas, the entrance into the seminar room beyond, and you can see that this space is intimately scaled. It's perhaps not as large as the lobbies that you have in this building, but it'll have a great sense of connection to the beautiful trees that you have in the green space to the west. Now we're going to take the irresistible stair, and I hope to take you through that stair when it's built, when we meet again. And we're actually going to fly up the stair opening, not actually walk up. But you can see that this idea of circulating up and down is celebrated by natural light, celebrated by beautiful use of materials, and also helping to heighten the sense of connection between the different floors of the building. We're turning here, getting a little bit of a glimpse view of the phase 1 building, and then the forum space as it reaches towards the south. And now we're rising into the 3rd floor, and now the stair between 3 and 4, where the wet labs and the experimentalist offices are located. And you can see there's a skylight at the top of the stair helping to bathe it in natural light and making just a really beautiful space right at the heart of the building. Just to finalize now, Researchers Neighborhood, we just saw a peek of the break room, and through the wood screens of the stair, you see a little peek of the largest conference room, which is one of those shared spaces. As we enter the research neighborhood, you'll see the critical adjacency that's maintained here between the wet lab, which has a glass wall at sill height, and the office areas. And you'll see that there's different types of workstations to allow for graduate students and undergraduate students to play a role and to be accommodated in this environment. Direct daylight comes through the connection out to these terraces. And the terraces actually have a balcony at level 4 and a stair that connects down to the main terrace below, which you can't quite see here. And now we're gonna fly out of the courtyard and get a view back to the phase 1 building where we are now. And we can begin to imagine the dialogue between these 2 buildings and how it'll really feel like a campus and how the buildings will complement each other to create an incredible place. And that's our presentation. Thank you.
All right, so we have time for a few questions, if anybody has any questions, and then we can continue the discussion up on the terrace at the reception. But does anybody have any?
2 minutes, Moira? Okay.
2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Oh, all right. All right, yep. Any quick questions?
I will also say that we have stations up there with more of the renderings. We actually have a VR goggle experience so that if you have more questions about the design, I and members of my team will be up there to help you understand the building and what it's going to be like.
The timing. Great questions. The question was, what's the timing? We're looking at finishing up the construction by the end of 2025, probably early 2026 move in. So moving along quickly. It's about four years cycle of, we've been at this for a couple of years designing, a couple of years of construction. Another question?
I have a question. I don't have a question. I have something to say.
Hi, Susie.
as the science that's going on in these buildings is truly unimaginable, and somebody my age, truly unimaginable, I think what you have done with this building is just excellent. I'm so pleased to be an alum of this university and come home and see this. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I can't imagine ending on a better note than that. So why don't we go up to the reception and have some beverages and continue the discussion. Thank you all so much for coming. Well done. It's great.
That was great.
Yeah. I love that last view.